a deadly quest, shape-shifting beasts, and a twist you won't believe. This is in the Lost Lands explained like never before. In the near future, the world will fall apart due to a massive war that will destroy everything. The Earth will be a wasteland, a place they call the Lost Lands. All the humans who remain alive will be gathered in just one city. This city is ruled by a powerful figure called the Overlord, and the church is responsible for maintaining order. No one dares to go against the set rules. One day, a woman named Gray was being prepared for execution, accused of being a witch. The person responsible for carrying out executions, known as the Enforcer, had taken on this task to set an example for anyone who might consider disobeying the church's commands. After the Enforcer left, Gray used her magic to make a guard, one of those standing watch, believe that he was the one being hanged in her place. The poor soldier fired at the rope to save himself, but in doing so, he accidentally cut the hanging rope and freed Gray without meaning to. Immediately after, the soldier imagined seeing Gray standing beside him, so he fired at her again. However, instead of killing her, he shot another soldier standing next to her. When the Enforcer found out about what happened, she went mad. She killed the soldier who had been enchanted and took the remaining troops to search for Gray everywhere. As they searched the room, Gray was hiding in the darkness and began taking down the soldiers one by one until only the Enforcer remained to face her. Gray cornered her and threatened her with a knife to her face. The Enforcer glared at her defiantly and said, "Kill me." But instead of granting her a quick death, Gray chose to hang her in the same way they had planned to hang her. As Gray walked away from the place, the people who had gathered parted for her and began shouting, "This is the witch who cannot be hanged." At the same time, there was another person named Boyce riding alone on his horse through the ruins. Suddenly, he stopped at the entrance of a tunnel, sensing from his experience that an ambush awaited him inside. As he said this out loud, a group of armed men appeared from their hiding spots. One of them ran directly at him, attempting to snatch Boyce's gun. But this was no ordinary gun. Attached to it was a strange two-headed snake, which bit the man and killed him instantly. Boyce then gripped his guns with both hands, and in the blink of an eye, he took down the entire gang before any of them could even touch him. Before leaving, he made sure to take his snake with him. Back to Gray, she found a place to hide in a tall tower. There, she met a simple woman, whom she left some money for without the woman asking. The woman recognized her from the touch of her hands and her kindness. Soon after, who should arrive but the Queen herself, along with Grace, the head of the Queen's royal guard, known as the Overwatch. The Queen came seeking Gray's help to gain superhuman strength. She wanted to transform into a wolf at will and offered her fine jewels and their price in exchange for this service. Gray, known for never being able to refuse anyone's request, agreed to the task. She explained that she would bring a skilled hunter to track down one of the shapeshifters, known as the shapeshifters, kill them, and bring the Queen their power. She gave her a deadline and said, "This mission must be completed by the next full moon, which is exactly 6 days away." As Gray was preparing her knives and weapons to set off on her journey, Grace also tried to approach her and make a wish. His wish was, what was it? He wanted Gray to fail in the Queen's mission and not bring that power to the Queen. He sat and swore to her that he was loyal to the Queen and didn't wish any harm to her, but he believed that this specific power would destroy her and ruin her. Gray honestly didn't believe him much. She felt that he was just jealous of the Queen and didn't want her to become stronger than him. But since she never refuses anyone's request, as agreed, she agreed and took his precious pocket watch as payment for the wish he asked for. After they left, Gray used a magical spell to look into the Lost Lands and see where she could find what she was looking for. With her own eyes, she saw a group of men trying to hunt a massive wolf. But this wolf was a savage beast that killed them all in mere seconds. At the same time, inside the palace, the Overlord ruler was sleeping in his bed, sick, asking the Queen to help him because he had wet himself again. The Queen looked at him with disgust and called for the servants. While they were coming, she sat and mocked her husband, clearly having reached her limits with him. A few moments later, we saw the Queen standing with Boyce, and it became clear that they were secretly involved with each other behind her elderly husband's back. When Boyce tried to sneak out of the palace at night without being seen, he was stopped by the palace guards. To escape, he blew the alcohol he was drinking onto a flame hanging on the wall. The fire caught onto one of the guards and set him ablaze. Then he kicked the second guard, sending him flying off the stairs. A short while later, in a tavern in the city, Gray met Boyce. She tried to engage him and benefit from his expertise as a professional hunter, especially since he was well known for his knowledge of every inch of the Lost Lands. Boyce, however, was solely focused on gambling and making money. Gray went and played in front of him, easily winning from the first round, but he was still hesitant to accept her mission. It was well known that anyone who ventured into the Lost Lands rarely returned unscathed. So Gray made him an enticing offer, saying, "Listen, if at any point you feel like I'm holding you back or weighing you down without coming back to me, just leave me and go. I give you my permission to do so." After that, Boyce softened a bit and told her about a legendary huge wolf living in a distant place called Skull River. As soon as Gray heard the name, she knew it was the same place she had seen in her vision. She promised Boyce that she would give him Grace's pocket watch if he agreed to take her to that place. While they were still negotiating, a group of soldiers suddenly stormed into the tavern. One of the soldiers was standing upstairs and opened fire on them, but Boyce was quicker. He threw his two-headed snake at him, and the snake killed the soldier in seconds. The soldier's body fell from above, and the snake jumped onto the arm of another soldier below. The soldier next to him, in an attempt to save his comrade, pulled out a knife and cut off the arm of the soldier with the snake on it. The snake took advantage of the chaos and escaped. At that moment, the enforcer herself entered the fray, and with her knife, she killed Boyce's snake. When she turned to see where Gray and Boyce were, she found that they had completely disappeared, as if the ground had opened up and swallowed them. In the church, the patriarch was standing, preaching to the people and reminding them that the desert dwellers and the atheists must be captured and tried so that justice can take its course. The people who were standing appeared to be praying and focused on his words, but secretly, they were passing around a small piece of paper among themselves. This paper contained information about a secret rebellion movement forming against the church and the overlord. After the sermon, we discovered that the patriarch was aware of the paper and that he had also noticed that Gray had become a symbol for this new rebellion movement in the eyes of the people. The enforcer brought to the patriarch the prostitute woman who Gray had helped. She kept pressing the old woman's hand until she could no longer endure it and confessed that Grace and the queen had gone to see Gray at her tower. The patriarch immediately ordered the enforcer to find Gray at any cost and force her to publicly admit that she had been manipulating the queen and Grace to tarnish their image. Once she confessed, she was to be hanged immediately. Once again, we returned to Gray and Boyce in the Lost Lands, where they were camped for the night. Boyce was trying to catch a new snake to replace the one that was killed, but he couldn't find any snake he liked or thought suitable. Gray was trying to sleep, and she found Boyce approaching her with a gleaming knife in his hand. She also drew her knife to defend herself, but it turned out he wasn't coming to harm her. He was just coming to kill a scorpion that was about to sting her while she was asleep. The next day, they reached a trading post in the middle of the wasteland. This place was run by a brother and sister named Mara and Ross, old friends of Boyce. As soon as Mara saw Boyce, she kissed him warmly. Then the brother and sister invited Gray and Boyce inside. They sat and talked, and Boyce told his friends that they would likely find the shape-shifting beast within a week, but Gray said she needed it urgently within a few days, so Boyce had to make a tough decision. He said they would take a shortcut, but it was a very dangerous path that no one usually took. The next morning, when Gray and Boyce decided to set off, Boyce warned Mara to be careful, along with her brother, as they were the only good faces left in the Lost Lands. As Gray walked, she spotted a massive skeleton of a terrifying beast placed inside a large iron cage. At the same time, the enforcer, along with a full army of soldiers, had begun searching for them in the Lost Lands, but this time they were riding in an armored train. When the queen found out that the patriarch had allowed the use of this train without consulting her first, she went to him personally in his office to talk. It wasn't just about the train, but she was also angry because he had sent all the city soldiers after Gray and left the city itself exposed and vulnerable, making it easy for anyone to attack. The patriarch responded, saying he had heard rumors about her betraying both him and her husband. The queen, of course, swore that all of this was lies and malicious gossip. A short while later, the patriarch called the enforcer, who was on the train, and told her that he was sure the queen was lying and that they needed to find the witch and capture her as soon as possible. The patriarch's plan was clear. If they captured the queen for treason, and her sickly husband, the overlord, died soon, which he seemed to be on the verge of, then the patriarch could take control of the entire city. A few days later, the enforcer soldiers found Ross and Mara, Boyce's friends. They captured them and began torturing them until Mara couldn't bear it any longer. She confessed that Gray and Boyce were heading to a place called the Skull River. Before the soldiers left, they killed the brother and sister and burned their trading post to the ground, leaving nothing behind. The next day, Gray and Boyce arrived at a place called the Rift, an old, completely collapsed city filled with deep cracks and chasms in the ground, as if it had been split in half. They entered an old, dilapidated building that housed an old cable car. Boyce began calling out to the cable car driver, who was known for taking anyone anywhere for money, but the man didn't respond when Boyce called. The two began searching for him inside the building, and unfortunately, they found the driver hanged and dead. They immediately knew that the soldiers had reached this place before them. Barely having time to turn and leave, they found the enforcer and her men surrounding them from all sides. The enforcer made an offer to Boyce. If he handed over Gray to them, they would let him go free. To prove they were serious and not joking, she showed him the body of Mara, his friend. At that exact moment, something strange happened. Mara opened her eyes with difficulty and whispered the name Boyce. As soon as the enforcer saw that she still had a soul, she shot her again to finish her off. When Boyce saw this, he lost his mind, unable to control himself, and opened fire on the soldiers with all his might. At the same time, Gray quickly rushed forward, struck one of the soldiers, knocked him down, grabbed his weapon, and started shooting as well. By working together, they quickly eliminated all the soldiers who were surrounding them. But the problem was that this wasn't all the soldiers. There was another army hidden inside the enforcer's train, and they all now joined the battle. Boyce and Gray kept fighting and killing as many soldiers as they could, but the soldiers were numerous, and every time they killed one group, another appeared. Their numbers were overwhelming, and they couldn't control them. And on top of all that, Gray ran out of ammunition. They tried to escape and run, but the train had a cannon, and the cannon fired a shell at them. Fortunately, they moved fast enough, and the shell landed next to them, throwing them to the ground without causing injury. They got up and quickly ran toward the old cable car, and Boyce took a precise shot that freed the cable car pulley. The soldiers were still chasing them and trying to reach the cable car, so Gray and Boyce began striking them with their hands and feet to keep them away from the car. As the car started moving through the air over the deep chasm, any soldiers who tried to jump onto it, or those who were knocked off by their strikes, all fell from the great height and died. A number of other soldiers appeared on top of the car's roof. At that moment, Gray climbed up to the roof and began fighting them with her knives. She moved quickly and lightly and managed to eliminate most of them. Then, she made a daring leap to the edge of the car's roof to lure the last soldier to follow her. When he got close, his hand was severed, and he too fell into the chasm. Meanwhile, inside the car, Boyce was still fighting the remaining soldiers inside. When the enforcer saw her soldiers being killed one by one and the car moving away, she ordered one of the soldiers with her to cut the cable car cables. The car shook and became suspended from only one side in the air, forcing Gray to drive her knives into the body of the car to hold herself up and avoid falling. Boyce broke a window of the car to knock out another soldier who was trying to get up. The enforcer shot at the second cable holding the car, and it fell quickly to the ground, sliding and crashing against the walls of an old building before finally hitting the edge of the rocky chasm. Gray and Boyce quickly began climbing the rocky wall to escape the car before it completely fell. They managed to get out at the last moment before the car plummeted into the chasm and shattered. The enforcer shot at them again, screaming in rage. Boyce was hit by a bullet in his shoulder while he was still climbing, but Gray had already reached the top. She used her magical powers to create an illusion or some kind of distraction, which gave them a chance to disappear without the enforcer noticing where they had gone. That night, Boyce removed the bullet from his shoulder himself, and Gray sewed the wound for him. Boyce sat thinking about his friends, Mara and Ross, who had been unjustly killed, and he swore that he would avenge them and take revenge on the enforcer. Before they went to sleep, they sat gazing at the sky, which was filled with strange colors, distant lightning, and storms. The next morning, the queen in the royal city discovered that she was pregnant. She was sure that this child was Boyce's son, but she pretended it was her husband, the Overlord's child. Now, with an heir to the throne strengthening her position, she decided to dispose of her old husband. She brought a pillow and placed it over his face, pressing it down until he died. Now back to Gray and Boyce, who had arrived at a dangerous area called the Shadow's Doom. This area was known to be filled with monsters and demons once nightfall came. They were still thinking about what to do when they heard the sound of the Enforcer's train coming behind them again, so they had no choice but to hide in the area and wait for the night. They entered and hid inside a huge abandoned cooling tower, breaking some crates and barrels, and gasoline leaked on the ground around them. Once night fell and darkness covered the place, the tower's lights suddenly turned on by themselves, and a demon appeared, trying to attack them. Boyce quickly threw a lighter onto the gasoline spilled on the ground, and a large circle of fire ignited around them, protecting them from the demon. Soon, more demons entered the tower, and the two had to open fire on them, but their bullets didn't have much effect on these creatures. The demons were smart, and they brought a long metal plank, placing it over the fire circle to form a bridge to cross to Gray and Boyce. To stop them, Boyce kicked the gasoline can towards them and shot it, causing the can to explode. But one of the demons jumped at the exact moment of the explosion and managed to reach Boyce and attacked him. Gray pulled the demon back by stabbing her knives into its body. The demon spun around quickly, trying to grab her, forcing Gray to jump and fight it with her hands and weapon. Boyce seized this opportunity, and he charged at the creature, pushing it with all his strength, causing it to impale itself on a metal spike that was sticking out of the ground. At the same time, Gray threw another dagger at a large gasoline tank in the area, and this time the explosion was massive, drawing the attention of the demon leader who was standing above the tower with a group of his followers watching. They all jumped down and attacked Gray and Boyce. The leader called out to Gray by name, saying to her, "You weren't supposed to return to this place." Gray used her magic to push the leader back, then unleashed fire from the palm of her hand, taking control of the fire circle around them. She began to enlarge and spin the fire until it turned into a massive firestorm that burned all the demons in the area, including their leader. When everything calmed down, Boyce told Gray that he was surprised he didn't feel the heat of the fire at all. Gray explained that the fire wasn't real. It was just an illusion she created to make the demons think they were burning and igniting. They died either from fear or due to the illusion they saw. She also revealed to him that this place hid a great treasure filled with ancient power and magic. She told him that long ago, a man hired her to come and steal that treasure. But the place was so corrupted and enchanted that it turned the man and all his men into demons, and they were the ones they encountered and got rid of. The next day, in the city, the patriarch came out and announced to the people that the Overlord had died, but the queen was pregnant, and the child in her womb would be the new Overlord. The people, standing in silence, didn't react much to the news, so Gress, the leader of the guards, fired a shot in the air to frighten them and make them cheer for the queen and the expected heir. Then the patriarch himself went and knelt before the queen, promising to be her loyal advisor and offer her all good counsel. But once he was alone, he began cursing her and called the enforcer, telling her that she should hurry and get rid of the queen as well. As for the queen, she too was plotting her own plan. She went to Gress, kissed him to manipulate him, and laughed at him. She intended to exploit his anger and authority over the army to control it, achieve her personal goals, and dominate everything. Now back to Boyce and Gray, who had arrived at another area called the Fields of Fire. Boyce said they were very close and would soon reach the place they wanted to go, the River of Skulls. The next day, knowing that facing the transformed beast would surely be dangerous, Gray suggested to Boyce that he take his agreed payment, which was Gress watch, and leave, letting her continue alone. But Boyce firmly refused and asked her to come with him and return to the city after finishing her mission. She told him she couldn't, as she was under a kind of curse that prevented her from refusing any task she was given or asked to do. The following day, Boyce and Gray were walking through a long tunnel when suddenly they heard the sound of the Enforcer's train approaching them again. They realized they wouldn't be able to escape or outrun it, so they decided to set a trap. Gray stood on the tracks, waiting until the train got very close, then started running ahead of it. The train driver, likely one of the Enforcer's soldiers, saw her and began chasing her with the train at full speed, unaware that this was a trap. Gray kept running, directing the train toward a section of the track that was broken and extended over a chasm. At the last moment, she jumped off the track, and Boyce was waiting below, catching her. As for the train, it couldn't stop in time and fell into the chasm beneath the broken tracks. A massive explosion destroyed the train, killing the enforcer, if she was still alive, and everyone who was with her on the train. When the news reached the city and the patriarch learned that the enforcer and her entire strike force had been destroyed, he quickly tried to gather his own guard to seize the throne by force before the queen could confirm it. But suddenly, he found that Gress and his army had surrounded him and everyone with him. Gress' army killed the patriarch and all the soldiers who were still loyal to him. Thus, the queen became the sole ruler of the city, with no one to challenge her. The next day, finally, Gray and Boyce reached the River of Skulls. This area was truly terrifying. The entire ground was covered in bones and skulls of victims of the wolf that lived here. They entered an old, dilapidated building and found signs that someone had been living in the place, such as food, an extinguished fire, and personal belongings, but there was no trace of the person themselves. Boyce said to Gray, "I think we should turn back, this is enough." But Gray was determined to complete the mission she came for. When night fell and the full moon was shining brightly in the sky, Gray attached sharp silver claws to her fingers and left the building to prepare for the confrontation. Boyce tried to stop her one last time, telling her that this was madness, but suddenly it was too late. The effect of the full moon began to manifest on Boyce, and he started to transform. It turned out that Boyce himself was the transformed beast who turns into a wolf, the very creature Gray had been hunting all this time. Gray looked at him in shock, realizing that he had likely agreed to come with her and lead her to this place specifically to trap and kill her here, away from anyone. Boyce's body began to grow, his muscles swelling, and his clothes ripped as he transformed into a massive, terrifying wolf-like beast. Gray threw the pocket watch she had at his face, as if throwing a token to its rightful owners or provoking him, and then began attacking him with the silver claws in her hands. But Boyce, in his legendary wolf form, was much stronger than her, easily throwing her around and slamming her into the ground. Gray ran away, using her magic again to create an illusion of massive flocks of birds attacking the wolf, which distracted him, giving her a moment to hide from him. When Boyce, in wolf form, jumped into the air to attack a large bird from the flock, the illusion vanished suddenly, and Gray appeared behind him, plunging the silver claws into his body with all her strength. Boyce tried to defend himself and turned to attack her, but he had already started weakening from the silver strikes. After several more blows, Gray managed to overpower him and bring him to the ground. He raised his arms in the air as if surrendering or making one last desperate attempt. Gray approached him to deliver the final blow and end him, but after a moment, Boyce regained consciousness, finding himself covered in wounds and scratches. Gray was sitting beside him, giving him water to drink and telling him to rest and not worry. Boyce was very tired, so he fell asleep again right away. The next time he woke up, he found himself bound in strong iron chains, and the secret was revealed. When Gray had sewn his shoulder wound earlier after he was shot by the enforcer, she had secretly inserted a small piece of silver under his skin inside the wound. This silver had been gradually poisoning his body, weakening him throughout the journey without him realizing it. Now, as Gray approached him, preparing to kill him and complete her mission, Boyce looked at her and said, "I have a wish, and you cannot refuse anyone's request." His wish was for them to stay together, hunt together, and travel together, thus ending the loneliness that each of them had been living with. Gray looked at him and agreed, but she said, "Everything has a price." At that very moment, the clouds covering the moon moved away, and the full moonlight fell on Boyce once again, forcing him to begin transforming into a wolf against his will. As he began transforming, Gray started to pay the price. She began to open his chest and tear through his skin with her daggers to take the power the queen had requested. The next morning, Gray stood at a freshly dug grave, throwing the pocket watch that belonged to Gress onto it. She then turned and walked away, carrying Boyce's wolf pelt with her. When Gray entered the city again, the poor and the oppressed, upon seeing her, began shouting her name loudly, as if she were their savior. Some of the queen's guards tried to calm them down and silence them, but it was to no avail. The cheering only grew louder. Soon after, The rebels from the underground resistance grew bolder and went to topple the massive cross, the symbol of the church and its authority. Gray went to Gress, handed him the wolf pelt, and gave him instructions on how the queen could use it to gain the power to transform into a wolf. Gress looked at her and said, "But with this, you've failed the mission that was paid for. I wanted you to fail the queen's mission, not succeed in it." Gray replied, "No, I didn't fail. I killed the queen's lover, who was betraying you with her, Boyce. Now, the queen is yours alone, and you can take her for yourself. That was your true wish, not for the queen to fail in transforming." Then, when the pelt reached the queen and she realized that this was Boyce's pelt, her lover, and that he had died, she collapsed in a fit of grief and screamed. It turned out that her true goal in transforming into a beast was not for power, but to become a monster like him so they could live together even as beasts. But Gress approached her and said that Boyce had corrupted her, making her think of betrayal and murder. At that moment, the queen understood that Gress had also betrayed her, manipulating her all along to get to her. She glared at him in intense anger, extended her hand, and took a long hairpin from her hair, and in a moment, she drove it into his neck, killing him instantly. The rebels outside took advantage of the chaos and Gress's death, storming the palace in massive numbers, killing every guard who tried to stop them. The guards' bullets were useless against the flood of people entering. When the sun rose the next morning, the sunlight burned the wolf pelt the queen had, turning it into a pile of ashes and making it disappear. At that exact moment, far away at the River of Skulls, Boyce's grave began to tremble, and the earth around it started to crack. After a while, we see Boyce return from death once again, perhaps due to his nature as a shifter or the magic of the pelt. He found Gray and approached her, clearly coming to kill her in revenge for what she had done to him. But before he could do anything, Gray confessed to him that she had known from the start that he was the queen's lover, and that everything that had happened, from the beginning of their journey to his temporary death, was part of a plan she had drawn. A plan to exploit the queen's desires, the patriarch's greed, and Gress's ambition against each other, so the rebels could finally rise up and overthrow all these oppressive rulers. At the same time, she had arranged for Boyce to survive in the end, not to die a true death. Boyce also tried to shoot her again, but his gun malfunctioned once more, possibly due to her magic or by chance. He attacked her with a knife, but Gray quickly dodged his strike, and they found themselves once again standing face to face, each holding a weapon's blade against the other's neck. Gray looked into his eyes and said, "Isn't this what you wanted? Wasn't this your wish for us to stay together?" Boyce looked at her for a moment, then agreed, and the two of them dropped their weapons and began walking side by side, continuing their journey together through the Lost Lands. And that is the end of the tale, until we meet again in another recap. If you love movies and movie recaps, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more. Hit like if you enjoyed the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.